So, Steve, the other day, I had a call with a friend of mine who I disagree with politically, and I was so struck by the fact that we didn't see eye to eye on anything, but it wasn't that we disagreed over the same facts. It's that we were looking at totally different facts. We were just in two different worlds.
Right.
And then I was telling a friend of mine about this yesterday. She and I agree politically. I was telling her about this conversation, and she said, "Why are you talking to those guys?"
Right. So it's like you're living in two different worlds, and the other person didn't even want you to acknowledge the other world existed.
Yeah. And I wasn't sure. I was like, where do I go? How do we run a country if we can't agree on a shared reality and we're not willing to understand the reality that other people, our fellow citizens, are living in?
Right. Where do we go from here? We need some kind of process, some kind of basis of discussion even about what's going on.
Yeah, or establishing like a shared or common sense of here's what the landscape looks like.
If only there were a show that would talk about this very issue, that would be interesting.
I agree.
Welcome to the Political Reality Podcast with Andrea and Steve.
Today is our introductory episode. We thought we would tell you a little bit about who we are, how we know each other, and what we're here to do over the course of this show.
Yeah, so this show is not a partisan show, right? We're not here to be hacks or to be pundits or to tell you the news necessarily. We want to talk about the story behind the story. Like, if you're angry that we are not bashing one side, we don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about why you're angry that we're not bashing that side and how that affects our politics today.
And we should be clear that this isn't saying that we're going to be out here saying there's good ideas on both sides if they're not, or that there's a common ground that is necessarily at the halfway point between two points of view if one is less grounded in reality than the other. And to be honest, I mean, we are humans, and so we're partisan people.
Absolutely.
But our goal is to set that aside and use our skill set as scientists and skeptics to say what's actually going on in this country and the world, but we will focus mostly on the U.S. for now. What's going on in this country? Why are different parties upset about different things? What are the policies that are actually at stake? And what are the actual things that we could do to make a difference other than just scream into the void or into our own echo chambers?
Right. So we'll try very hard not to do any false balance.
Right.
As you say, or false equivalency. Call it like it we'll see. It's going to be asymmetrical, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be different. And, you know, the party that's running the whole country is probably going to be in the news a little bit more than the other party. That's just a reality. But we want to get very meta, I think, as much as we can. Like, let's talk about why people react this way or why they think that. But I also think, and this is why I'm so glad that you're here with me on this podcast, I want to talk about how government runs. Like don't you feel like this country needs a civic lesson? I talk to people all the time. It's like, you don't even know how laws are made, do you? Or you don't know how things operate. We can't even have a basis for a conversation.
That's right. I think there's both a basic knowledge that we've either forgotten or stopped prioritizing or pretended doesn't exist. And then from there, this kind of weak foundation, I think we have a lot of misunderstanding about what the trade-offs of certain policies are. And most policies are super nuanced, and there's good parts and bad parts of any particular intervention that the government, and there's good things about the government and bad things about the government. But I feel like we've been forced into a very, black and white thinking, but also based on some imaginary ideas, as you said, about how things work.
Yeah, I often get frustrated because I feel like we're not talking about the things we should be talking about. Like, what are the policy ideas? What are the trade-offs? What are the different perspectives? What's the history here? How do we move forward and actually run the government like adults? Instead, we're talking about made-up issues that are manufactured to distract us from the real issues, that are made to keep us engaged and to keep us outraged. And so we're kind of at the mercy of the political class who are doing this. The media, they're trying. Some of them are trying, but I don't really feel like they've captured this moment. I don't think they've risen to the level where they need to be to really keep politicians grounded in reality. And I think the voters are not really holding their politicians to any kind of morality or factual basis of reality like they should be. We're kind of just drifting off into fantasy land, and that's not a way to run a democracy.
And I think with the addition of AI and the, last 10 years or so of social media, we're in a situation as well where we can find evidence to support any view we want to make. Some of that evidence might be stronger or less strong, but I feel very much like there isn't a place for me to go to at least get some sense of what's going on, what are the best arguments on either side or multiple sides, and how can I, as a thoughtful person who cares about this country, actually think about these things separate from my own party loyalties or ideologies. Of course, we have values and things that we care about, but really to just get past a lot of the, I'm so tired of being angry.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be angry about, but I don't think we have to be angry all the time.
Right. And, the angry should be constructive, not destructive.
That's
right. It should be a way of moving forward to some kind of solution. Like, it's good to be angry that things aren't working well and I want to make them work better.
Right.
It's I think it's destructive to say I'm angry at half of the country for being bad people when that's just not true.
Right.
And
we'll talk about that in future episodes about exactly how ideologically different we are or not.
Yeah.
And so maybe we should say a few words about how this podcast came to be and how we know each other.
Well, first, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? You're a political scientist. What is that actually? Yes. And why does that position you well, I think, to talk about these issues?
I am glad you asked. A political scientist, believe it or not, is in fact a scientist. A lot of times when I say I'm a political scientist, the first response is politics isn't a science. And I will agree that politics, the practice of politics, the running for office, you can be scientific about it in terms of strategizing a campaign or negotiations. But in general, it's not a field of science, politics. Right. But political science is a field of science. It means taking the scientific method, just like we would apply to understand migration patterns of whales or the dynamics of black holes or something like that. We apply that lens and that methodology to politics. So the field of political science has a number of subfields, but in general, they're broadly divided into a whole bunch of people who work on specifically American politics. We'll pull from that quite a bit in this show, and we'll bring on many political scientists with that specialty. There's the field of comparative politics, where we say the joke is that comparative politics is the rest of the world because of an American-centric lens. But generally, we say things like, why are some democracies more robust in certain countries? Why do some countries have this government system versus that? What are the trade-offs in comparing? International relations is my home field, my original field, which is why do we have conflict? Why do we have cooperation? Does the UN do anything? Can we stop war in a way that's robust? And then there's a field that I know embarrassingly little about, that's political theory, which is, Plato, Aristotle, what is the nature of justice? And hopefully we'll have some of that, but I will be candid. I have less to say on that front.
Yeah. And we will be, as you alluded to, we will be bringing on experts, into the podcast. There'll be sometimes a third person sitting back here who has a particular topic expertise, because we're not just going to rely upon our own specific information. We want to talk to the experts and see what they have to say.
So to give just an example there, so one of the things political scientists are interested in, a comparison to say maybe political polls or other sorts of data that you might see in the news. So I spent about a year at 538, Nate Silver's website, RIP, where we put a lot of data out in the world about political polls. So who's going to vote for who? What's turnout going to look like? What is the approval rating for the government? And that is a quantification of politics.
Right.
But political science typically takes a broader lens and says, okay, well, why do people vote in the first place? What motivates someone to get up out of their house and go and fill out a thing or punch a button or show up and wait in line and do all of these things? What are the levers that we can use to motivate more people to do it? Do those levers work if we actually run them? And so we're going to be kind of getting into, one way I like to think about this is like political polls and political predictions and what's going to happen in the next race. That's kind of like weather forecasting.
Yeah.
You can think of political science as more of like a climate science. Like on average, this sort of person votes in this sort of way. Or typically the things that drive someone to join a political protest are the following, and trying to understand broader patterns. So that's the lens that I bring to a lot of politics conversations, and certainly the lenses that other political scientists will largely bring.
Right. So how does government work? How does politics work? How does voting work? How do people behave?
And what are the trade-offs of different types of voting systems and different ways of reaching to, a consensus in government and things like that?
Right. And the expertise that I bring to this is as a science communicator and a skeptic for 30 years. So what I do is figure out how to obtain information, how to analyze that information, how to put it into some kind of logical, critical thinking, fact-based, scientifically literate context to come up with some kind of tentative conclusion about what's probably true, right? And look at all the ways in which we deceive ourselves. We are deceived, cognitive biases, heuristics, which are just rules of thinking that we maybe subconsciously employ oftentimes. And then I want to apply all of that to politics. Part of the reason why I want to do that is because for 20 years, I've been running a science podcast, The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and I get tons of questions about the critical thinking and skepticism as applied to politics. But we're more of a science-centric show. So I really need a political-centric show that applies critical thinking and, scientific literacy and all of that to politics. But I need a political scientist to help me do that. Andrea and I have known each other for years. We've been doing conferences together for years. So I knew she was the perfect person for this podcast.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I have been very grateful to be a guest on your other podcast for some time. And I do think that every time I roll up, you're all talking about this is a thing about Mars, and this is some kind of new source of power. It's amazing. And then I'm like, did you know that voters tend to blah, blah, blah? So I'm also excited to have a home where we can talk about this stuff all of the time.
Right. So what are we going to try to accomplish here? I think part of it is just when talking about this show, we've said to each other, it's not like we want to tell you what opinion you should have. Just want your opinion to be more informed, right? Whatever opinion it is, it should be backed by facts. It should be logically consistent. It shouldn't just be the narrative that some politician made up and fed to you in order to drive whatever their political agenda is. Because I got to be honest with you, when I'm talking with other people, just friends and family and acquaintances, that's almost all what I get. I mean, tell me if you disagree. It's here's the talking point that I was just spoon-fed, and this is now what I think. And this is based upon this narrow piece of information that was put in front of me. And that's it. That's reality.
That's right.
Right?
No, and that's been totally my experience. And I also think that a large part of this show is I have recently become very lost in the research that's out there on misinformation. Mm-hmm. And yes, there is a lot of misinformation out there about all kinds of things, and you do a great job on The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, debunking a lot of that stuff, for example, around vaccines, climate, all of that stuff. But there's also this issue where in many cases, we don't necessarily have incorrect information. Mm-hmm. I just have a handful of facts that have been hand-chosen to support a particular argument. And I think what we're really trying to do here is say, can we do our best possible effort, again, acknowledging cognitive limitations in all humans and biases and all of that, but what can we come to understand about, say, immigration, or say voting trends, or say government spending, and set aside our partisan goals and just say what's actually happening and what would be the trade-offs if we did something differently.
I mean, it's just the basic critical thinking, but applied to politics.
Exactly.
So, again, whenever you hear any piece of information, immediately you should be thinking to yourself, okay, well, where did that information come from? And why is that information being curated for me, right? Especially if this information was put in front of you. Is this all the information I need? Is there more context here? Is there more nuance here? It's always more complicated than you think. Right. Always. So you have to think about that aspect as well. How do I understand this on a deep enough level that I could have a meaningful opinion about this? Because whatever the Republicans are saying is only a tiny slice of reality. Whatever the Democrats are saying are only a tiny slice of reality. The real story is always more complicated. Again, not that there's a balance between the two, but it's in there somewhere.
Yes.
And you have to go out and find it. Right. How do you do that? How do you get that information? So a lot of what we're going to be talking about is, again, we live in an information-rich world, but not only that, we live in a world where other people are controlling your information, right? With social media algorithms control what comes before you, and now artificial intelligence is supercharging this. And if you're not in control of your own information, then how is that? How can you run a democracy? How can you say that you have a vote and you are choosing your representatives, whatever, if they're controlling your information? This is going to be an episode, definitely, the information autocracy. You can have totally control of society without, any brick and mortar sort of military infrastructure if you just completely control the information that the citizens see.
And there's a lot of research to show that, we're more likely to click on and engage with and retweet and repost things that charge us emotionally. So things that make us angry, things that make us fearful. And so no wonder we're seeing more and more of that.
We're easy to manipulate.
We are very easy to manipulate.
And now we've handed the technology of manipulation to the political class, to our leaders. And they're using it to manipulate us. But we, at least for now, we still live in enough of a democracy that we can inform ourselves and use that information to exert our control, through the power of the vote, through democracy, through protests, through whatever means, so that we can actually do what we're supposed to be doing, which is hold our leaders accountable so that they do things that are transparent, are moral and ethical, are in our interests and not their interests. If we're just voting partisan anger, outrage, then they have the power. We don't have the power.
And I think part of the reason we're doing this show is that you and I have felt that there isn't a great place to go to get this. There's certainly other
there's resources out there, but you got to know how to. You got to get them. You got to know how to use them.
So we're hoping to curate some of that, and I think figure it out as we go as well. In terms of, I don't know everything about all of these issues, not even close, and so we'll be bringing on experts and we'll be talking about this topic. So what kind of topics are we going to cover?
Well, I know the next episode we're going to talk about ranked choice voting, just different styles of voting, which is a great topic. Because it's like, oh yeah, people. I remember when I first heard your lecture on that, I'm like, oh yeah, I never really thought about how to vote. Like the one person, one vote thing is so obvious, but there's a really interesting, deep story there. I'd love to talk about things like gerrymandering. Like, how bad is it? How do we get our way out of that, for example? All those kinds of just like purely political issues. Then we can go topic by topic, like what does the evidence actually say about global warming or gun legislation or whatever, about these specific topics.
Right. I mean, I think for any issue that we might care about, whether it's abortion or healthcare or immigration or guns, name a topic that we're all angry about for one reason or another. There is an empirical, factual reality on the ground, and the idea is to really shed light. Okay, what does the immigration situation actually look like? Where are people coming from? What are the levers that we have to change it? What are the trade-offs and what are the risks and what are the arguments on either side? And so again, to go back to what you said, we're not here to tell you what to think or even necessarily what to think about per se, but we're here to help guide you into having the most informed opinion possible that you can have.
Maybe a little bit about how to think critically, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you do that, this is also my experience. So, I know lots of people across the political spectrum personally, and I listen to people on the right saying all these negative things about people on the left that I know are not true. And it's like, no, nobody believes that, right? That's not what they're saying. That's not what they believe. That is not their priorities. It's not what they're like. And then again, and the other way too. It's again like they're living in completely different realities, because I think they are. They're living in different universes of information. But once you know a little bit deeper about what's actually going on, and you know the facts on that are more complete, that sort of illuminate things on both sides, then the temperature comes way down. And people are like, oh, okay, so at least what they're saying makes sense. I may disagree with it still, but at least it's not this demonic, monstrous thing that they're doing. It's just that they have reasonable but different priorities. One
rule of thumb that I have had for myself, and it's very difficult to follow, is anytime I find myself thinking, how could someone even possibly hold a view different from my own? That is a red flag that I need to do some investigating, because probably there is a set of reasons. I may not agree with them or the importance of them. In some cases, sure, there are wild, imagination-rich reasons out there. But for the most part, our fellow citizens are working from facts. They're just different facts from us.
So you said a very important thing, that our fellow citizens. So we have to make sure that there are times when we're talking about the political class.
Right.
And there are times that we're talking about rank and file citizens, right? And try not to conflate those two things, because while I think most people are good people and they think they're good people, they think that they're correct, they think that they have the information and that their point of view is better than the other point of view. I'm not going to say that categorically about politicians or about the political class, because they have an agenda. And that agenda can involve a lot of other things other than just good policy or the truth or transparency, et cetera. So we'll try to be clear when we're talking about people, the citizens, as you say, versus the political class. I think those are two different categories.
That's right. And I think as well, one of the episodes that we'll do is about different types of polarization in this country. And one term that I love to talk about and often gets people worked up is affective polarization, which is this idea that Americans, and these are regular citizens, it's also true for leaders, but regular citizens, one of the biggest observations we have about people on the left and people on the right is that we hate each other. We don't trust each other. The left calls the right hypocritical, closed-minded, selfish, uninformed, and the right calls the left that. And what if that's actually not true among most American citizens? And so if we shed that view of you disagree with me politically, you must be the enemy, it turns out that there's a lot of room for policy compromise. And so that's one area.
We actually mostly agree on most things.
Common sense gun control and
common
moderate
sense
interventions.
things. Most people, it turns out, are not monsters. They're just they're actually fairly reasonable.
Right.
It's just that we live in a complex world.
Right.
And we're easy to manipulate with misinformation or just curated information, not even factually incorrect information.
And so I think to paraphrase something that you said to me as we were planning this show, I think if we're doing our job right, we may say things that are inconvenient or unwelcome for people with any political persuasion.
Right.
And I'm sorry in advance / you're welcome.
Yeah.
Right.
So even with the science show, one of my metrics is if I piss everybody off, I probably hit the sweet spot of where the reality is. Because again, reality is nuanced, it's complicated, it never fits a clean narrative that you want it to.
Like this is good and this is bad, and you're right and I'm wrong.
That's the whole idea about compromise in politics. Nobody's happy, and if nobody's happy, you probably did a good job. So that's kind of a hard goal to set for a show. Like, we want to make you unhappy. It's like, no, but we want to challenge you to not be comfortable. Right? If we're not pushing you out of your comfort zone, we probably haven't pushed you hard enough.
And speaking of, if anyone has any recipes for thicker skin, I'm going to need some. But I'm up for the challenge. So we hope you'll join us for our show. We're going to have all kinds of exciting episodes coming up. The next one is about ranked choice voting as advertised, and we'll have some guests, and we'll keep us all thinking critically about politics, particularly at this difficult time.
I'm looking forward to it.
See you in the next episode.